Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. Today is January 19th, 2021. For those of you who might be new to our broadcasts, every other broadcast, typically I will run a question and answer in open forum. You can ask any question as it relates to therapy, psychology, relationships, relates to your child to the program. Um, there are some guidelines. I won't talk about other programs. I won't speak to that. I can't give really specific advice to your child. I can talk about ideas, concepts, and principles involved, but I'll always defer to your wilderness therapist. Um, but you can also invite, just remember this, you can also invite extended family and friends. So if you have somebody in your circle that you want to share or introduce to our process, they're welcome to attend these. You can also ask questions about family and friends and siblings, or you can ask questions that a family, friend, or sibling has asked you, and then you can hear my answer and compare it against yours and use of it what you might find helpful. So we have some questions left over often from the previous episode. Tonight we have one question left over. So I'm going to get to that. In the meantime, you can pass on your questions, comments at any time. Malia, who's moderating for me this evening, will collect those and then pass those on to me one at a time. So let me get to this question. First one. Someone writes, I think also the parent bond to the child is much more intense than any other relationship because we are inherently responsible for their very survival as children. And that is so painfully magnified when a child is outside of the normal parameters of what is reasonable to the parental psyche. For example, high risk behaviors and a total lack of control a parent has in the face of them. And then the primacy of the roles and the bond of parent child itself. Buddha, in teaching the difficulty of becoming truly fear awakened, said, meditate on your children as if they are already dead. I feel like this is the final frontier of letting go and continuing to go inward to heal ourselves and not try to control the other. The boundaries you speak of are the way. I choose, insert boundary. The key is owning if you have insidious judgment or blame at the child, young adult. Well, I don't have much to say in addition to that, except for whoever wrote that is doing their work and thinking, I think, very, very, very clearly. So thank you for the comment. I don't have anything to add to it. I think it's everything you said in your comment is true. Somebody writes, we plan to have my daughter attend a residential treatment center post Evoke, which is on February 3rd. That is only 2 weeks away. I still don't have suggestions from my education consultant about next placement and wondered how swiftly this process goes once RTCs, residential treatment centers, or therapeutic boarding school names are offered to me. I'm stressing at the compressed schedule. Is there an application process? Well, that's a really compressed schedule. You're usually going to hear about the schools with more than 2 weeks notice. It can happen, by the way. If you're worried about is it possible logistically, it's very possible, but still, I think 2 weeks or more notice is almost always the case. So a couple of things. I would ask your wilderness therapist if the ending date that you have is not what they're expecting. But I think asking your wilderness therapist and your educational consultant about needing some time, I think is really, really valid. My best guess is that they're not assuming that February 3rd is the date. That's the only thing I can assume. And you can tell by my assumption that I'm saying that yes, it can happen. No doubt about it, it can happen. But oftentimes you're going to research it, you're going to study it. One thing that we're noticing during the COVID world is that more than at non-COVID times, children are being transported to the next program without the parents. So that leaves that makes it a little bit more of an efficient process. You don't have to make travel plans. You don't have to set all of that up, and so transporting can happen more efficiently and with less planning on your part. But in general, it's usually more than 2 weeks. Yes, it can happen quickly or even quicker than that. But I would ask and press the wilderness therapist and your consultant, and I would ask them if they were not counting on the same date or thinking of the same date that you are, because that's my assumption based on the information that I have from you. So thank you for that. There's an application process, but usually if you have a consultant, they've vetted the program, the child with the program and the admissions folks even before you or we end up talking to them. So yes, but if you have a consultant, it's probably just a formality and just filling out paperwork. That's my best guess. Thanks for the question. Very, very fair question. I can understand why you would feel nervous and anxious with so little time left. Somebody says, what advice can you give if you're considering bringing your child home from wilderness and not sending him to a therapeutic boarding school? You know, get your work up and running. That's what I suggest. I think to emphasize our philosophy in general, specifically as it relates to your question, in some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways, the parent readiness might be a more important predictor of success at home than the child success. Making sure, again, I'll go to the slides that I show you at the end of every broadcast, making sure you've gone to the 6 12-step support groups, and that if any of them feel like a good fit to you, that you can get a sponsor, making sure you have a therapist for you, any intensive work that you want to do prior to your child coming home. The more work for you, the better, because and kind of preparing yourself for something other than a total fix would be what I would say. Obviously the child's progress, the child's risk factors, the child's other things in the context besides you, the child's specific behaviors that led them to being sent to Evoke, all of those figure into the equation first, but really, really get all of your work done. Or started, I should say. Get all of your work going. Hit the ground running. Don't wait. For those of you that are new to this process, start attending the 12-step support groups as soon as possible. I've listed on the slides, if you're watching on the live broadcast, alanon.org, coda.org. Al-Anon is for was set up for the spouses originally of alcoholic men, the wives of alcoholic men originally, but it's expanded to be really anybody who's in relationship with somebody that they care about who has alcohol or substance abuse issues. But it can even be broader, and your qualifier, that's what they call the person that's struggling with a substance abuse disorder, your qualifier can have other issues besides addiction. Ultimately, you're just in a relationship with somebody who's self-destructive, who is self-sabotaging, and you have to figure out, how do I stay in a loving, boundaried relationship with that person, maintain my own serenity, and operate as healthy as possible. That's what it is generally. If you get caught up on the specifics, you really lose the important messages. Coda.org stands for Codependence Anonymous. That was created to be more broadly applicable, very similar to Al-Anon, but its name and its origin said you don't have to have an alcoholic spouse originally, or an alcoholic or addict in your family. Families Anonymous, again, broader, just being in a family. The one that I think is underrated is Adult Children of Alcoholics. Adultchildren.org is the website to go to. I talk to people who go to these. I love ACA, as it's called sometimes, and I wish it was just called Adult Children of Parents. Because most people, when I say try ACA as an option, Adult Children of Alcoholics as a meeting, most people will say, well, I didn't have alcoholic parents. But it's really not about having alcoholic parents. It's about having parents that are human. And you have to deal with the pathology that you were raised with. And everybody has some pathology in their family of origin. RefugeRecovery.org is an alternative option, less of a higher power focus, Buddhist-inspired recovery, and really is for family members or people that are suffering from substance abuse disorder themselves. And then the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI.org, is a great resource to find classes, free resources in your area. So get your work started, get it rolling, know what your project is. I don't think that there's a better investment. I mean, I really believe this. It's a product that we sell, but I don't believe that there's a better investment that you can make in your child than um, doing your own work, and maybe most specifically doing your own intensive work. Like I've said over and over again, I do them myself. I pay for my family to go to them. I pay for my employees to go to them. It's something that we believe in. I believe in very, very strongly. So those are some opportunities. You can do them online right now. We have them online. The next one is February 10th through 12th, and also the next available spot for our in-person intensives is March 17th through 20th. So get your work started. Know what it is. Obviously, the podcast. If you're listening to this, the books that I've written, those are what I have to offer to your journey and to your work. So all of that is yeah, all of that is I think fits under the larger umbrella of get your work started now. If that's an option for you, um, I would start as soon as your child gets to Evoke. And I have Malia. Maybe you can look it up, but I have a broadcast on coming home after wellness therapy. Malia, if you can find that in the archive library and put the link there with the episode number, that might be helpful. Somebody says, please comment on the movie Beautiful Boy. That's the one with Steve Carell, I think, right? If I'm not mistaken. Um, it's been a while since I've seen it. I remember I usually have pretty strong reactions to movies that talk about mental health issues or addiction issues. I remember thinking it was a really it was a really fair dramatization of having a child suffering from addiction. Um, I don't have much more to say about that because I don't remember a lot of the plot points. I apologize, but yeah, I think it was remembering the feeling I had about it. I think it was a really, really fair dramatization about what it looks like, what it feels like. I think some of it was they took some dramatic license, but I think overall I liked it. Someone says, can you expand on boundaries and what to do when kids don't respond to consequences? I have probably more broadcasts on boundaries than any other. So, work your way through those. And Malia has put on here the coming home after treatment and home contracts is episode 327. And she's putting the podcast link for you there. But I say in the Audacity to Be You that people that improve in their boundaries don't set stricter boundaries; they set better boundaries. And the reason I wrote that sentence is because it's a different quality. Boundaries come out of and are an extension of the development of a healthy self. I talked and talked in in-service today about my presentation in in-service today was boundaries, behavior, and teaching students how to be a person, teaching a student how to be a person. It's something that language I've been using lately, that we're really learning how to be a person. And our parents, most of us didn't learn how to be a person, and nobody taught them how to be a person. I'll tell you what, for sure, our professors in college, when we're learning how to be a therapist, they definitely don't teach us how to be a person, or very, very few of them do. And so it means leaning into your fallible self. And boundaries, another important aspect about boundaries that I talk about in the Audacity to Be You is that, and I say this all the time, it might be the premise of the Audacity to Be You, which is it's not about, you don't get to be right anymore in this work. Boundaries don't come from a place of being right. They come from a place of being you. So you don't get to be right or good anymore, but you do get to be a self. And being a self is better. And so the work is dependent upon you becoming a self, a healthy self. And if you're like me or most people I've ever met, there's work to do there. One thing I said to in-service today, I'm going to write something about this because I think it's actually a big issue. I've been thinking about this the last couple of weeks. Most of what I have to teach you in my writing and in the broadcast comes from my own work, right? It comes from the work that I've done on me. That's the source of most of the important stuff. Anything valuable really comes from that. Yes, I study. Yes, I read. Yes, I have an incredible education through working with clients. All of that augments and adds richness to the work that I've done on myself, gives me language and metaphor and ideas and concepts. All of that is true, but really it's about my work. And the thing about it is you can get something from my work, but it's not the same as doing your work. When I give speeches, back when I used to give public speeches, and sometimes when I do them online now, my greatest hope is not that you'll take away any 1 or 2 points from my talk. My greatest hope is that you'll be inspired to do your own work. Like I've done my own work. When I have clients that I've had for many years, and people come to them because they share and they're open about some of their struggles, and some of those struggles are with children, and that gets them into therapy. What they say is, um, therapy helps me, and I would encourage you to try out therapy. And then I would add to that an adequate therapist, where I talk about, I have one of the podcasts and one of the chapters on what to look for in a therapist. I mean, finding a good therapist is important, and I almost don't say that enough, but it's important. But it's about doing your work. And I was saying to the staff today, your limitations and your ability to execute your job come out of your own unhealed, unprocessed wounds. I said to our staff today, you're all in that young adult range. And so you're working out identity and insecurities on a daily basis. And your drive to be good is going to be a huge barrier to being an effective staff member and to becoming who you are. And so that's why I'm so averse to giving you guys lines or advice about directions to go, because it can't be replicated. I can't teach you how to create your art, right? I can teach you some techniques, some principles, some concepts, but your masterpiece, I couldn't possibly paint it, and nobody else can paint it. It is uniquely yours. Your life is uniquely yours. Joseph Campbell says the purpose of life is life. It's your life. People look for meaning in life, and they are the meaning. It's your life. And so I know I sound very abstract and very philosophical when I talk, and I apologize for that, but that's just been my evolution over 25 years of doing this, where I realize the only way to tell you the truth is to become more philosophical and abstract. Yes, we have the 8 tools, we have various theories that we present to you, but it's really just about becoming a self, becoming a person, learning to love your horrible, rotten self. And boundaries come out of that. What to do when a kid doesn't respond to consequences? All kinds of things. Stay curious, ask questions, escalate the boundaries, right? There's no one right thing to do. And this is the thing. Boundaries aren't the solution anyway. Boundaries are just self-care. Boundaries are you taking care of yourself and being you. So, if you were my client and your child wasn't responding, I could eventually get to the place where I would say, I don't know what to do. That's why you go to Al-Anon. Back to that slide. That's why you go to Al-Anon and Families Anonymous and CODA, because The essence of these programs are this. You are in a close, intimate relationship with somebody who has a mental illness or an addiction that may be incurable. Now, what are you going to do? How do you stay in a relationship with somebody, love somebody, take care of yourself when they have an incurable disease or mental illness? And so you learn from these people. And I'm taking your question to the extreme, right? I'm not talking about not responding to a specific small consequence. But ultimately, you learn that you can't control other people. You learn the only thing you can control is you. You learn that your serenity, your peace of mind, your happiness, your meaning is your responsibility, not your child's. You learn that you don't know their truth, but that doesn't stop you from setting clear boundaries. You learn the boundaries come from a different place. They're motivated from a different place. You learn that when you get upset, angry, frustrated, sad, disappointed, that you need support from people that can hold you. And your children or your spouse who's struggling with addiction or mental illness might not be able to hold you, or maybe your mother or your father or your sibling. See, these groups, these 12-step groups are for people who love people that they can't change, that they want to change. So I maybe I'm getting too broad for your question, but if your question, I mean, part of what I would do is get curious, consider an alternative, try to understand the behavior, escalate the consequence, stay consistent. There's something in behavioral theory that teaches us that when you set clear boundaries with consequences, that negative behavior will often increase. It's called an extinction burst, right? So staying consistent, maybe escalating the consequences, those can be all options of approaches to it. But ultimately, it's this idea of, how do I stay in relationship to somebody? Do I stay in relationship to somebody that's self-sabotaging and sick, who I love, who I can't control? And if so, how do I do that? You'll go into these meetings and some of these people's qualifiers will be deceased. Then what? They're still coping with the relationship they have with a mother or a father or a sibling or a spouse or God forbid, a child who's gone. And they're still going there because they know that they're the carrier of the disease of codependency. And that it didn't die with the person who passed on, that they carry it with them, and it's going to show up in their relationships with everybody. Codependency is, I see parents that are extraordinary people. I shouldn't say parents, people that are extraordinarily codependent who don't have children with significant mental health or addiction issues. I also see people that are far less codependent than others who have children with significant mental illness or addiction issues. The only thing that curing codependency, listen to this. The only thing that curing codependency, and boundary work is a really big part of codependency. The only thing that curing codependency does is fix you. It doesn't fix the other. You definitely stop contributing to the problem as much. You extricate yourself from the problem. But curing your codependency doesn't fix anybody else. And I do think that there's, in all parent education, all parent work and self-help books, there's an implied discussion that is, if you set good boundaries, your child will get better. That's the problem in the first place. The idea that you can control another person is codependency. And so just because we've improved your toolbox and equipped you with some concepts and ideas, we're not teaching you how to fix them better. We're teaching you how not to be a part of the problem. And we're teaching you how to make healthier contributions to your relationships because of how you're becoming. Looks like I have lots of questions that have come up now. Somebody writes, our son left Evoke 6 weeks ago. When he found out he was going to try aftercare, he refused to talk to us. It's been about 3 months since we've spoken to him. How can we expect him to heal without family therapy? We believe all this anger and hatred of us is contributing to his depression, etc. We want to push or force a conversation, even if he just vents on us. It's a really, really, really good question. And I think your instinct to let him vent is the right one. Often the first few letters that evoke are angry, not always angry, but sometimes sad. Often they're intended to manipulate, but I always find them valuable, even when they're not well written, even when they're not insightful. And so, again, encouraging curiosity and asking questions. I was just talking to a former student of mine last week, and she was describing how at her RTC, how she wasn't allowed to move up a level until she was nicer and had nicer things to say to her parents. In fact, at one point, she was required to, well, required is a strong word. There were consequences if she didn't tell her parents that she loved them. And I think that's crazy. I don't know if you see it, but that's crazy. The way out for children is anger and pain, and often right through the parents. So with some support, yes, I think your inclination to have them say anything, even to have a visit where they blow up at you. If they're just power struggling, if they're just trying to hold you hostage or blackmail you with love, that's another thing to look at. But I think showing up in some way, creating some dialogue, if you're willing for it to be messy and angry, I'm all for it. I think there are some letters you could write, like a letter of awareness, which is something the students write here, talking about your own issues. I mean, the more vulnerable you can be, the better. But I would also just encourage curiosity. I always hope that the therapist that's working with your child is out of the box and creative and doesn't get rigid or stuck in kind of one track. That there's flexibility of thinking and approaches. And I say this all the time to you folks. You have the right to ask really, really, really hard questions. And you have the right to expect really intelligent answers. When I've worked with therapists with my own children, I believe in that. And a lot of their questions aren't very intelligent. And respectfully, I let them know, like, that's not good enough. And I'm not just going to be the good parent client and shut my mouth and not challenge that. I'm going to tell you that I don't buy it. And I've had to say that to a few therapists. I mean, I'm also trained in this, and so I have the advantage. But yeah, ask intelligent questions and require intelligent answers. And if you have a therapist or a parent coach that you're seeing on the side that's not associated with a program, get support and empowerment and clarity from them. But remember, a lot of therapists are working out their own crap. And they should be able to talk about that. They don't have to go into details and tell you their story, but they should make it very clear that they don't know everything. And they're struggling for their own significance in life also, right? And hopefully they're going to therapy and going there consistently. I've never met a therapist who didn't need a lot of therapy. Frankly, I don't meet anybody who doesn't need a lot of therapy in any context, even socially. But therapists are perhaps more obligated to make sure they're doing their work because of their impact and position. The fact that they're positioned as a mental health expert. So they need to be getting It's incumbent upon them to be getting good therapy. And I'm not the reason I'm telling you this is because if your therapist's mental health issues are compromising their ability to work with you clearly, that should be talked about with somebody. Somebody writes, in a healthy boundaries webinar, you mentioned don't coerce others and set boundaries and let go of the outcome. Don't coerce others. Oh, don't coerce others and set boundaries and let go of the outcome. So great. But what do you do when the boundary is home for dinner and the child says home at curfew at midnight? That's my boundary. Again, we could talk through, and it goes on to say risk of relapse and overdose. Curious about dueling boundaries with a child that's extremely high risk. It's not a democracy. It's a benevolent dictatorship. And if your child is under 18, it's not their boundary to come home when they want. You're the one charged with the boundary. Legally, I believe psychologically, you're there to protect them from themselves. Now, there's a lot of work to understand kind of how to negotiate and how to find the gray area and all of the stuff that we talk about. Like, that's very, very complex. So that's why doing your own work and developing a sense of self is clear. But again, if the question is like, what happens if they don't follow a boundary? All the things I said to the other person, escalating boundaries. If they're over 18, the nuclear option is you can't live here. Becoming curious, trying family therapy, making I could say this over and over again, making sure you're going to these groups. Because what these groups teach you, not only are they for people who love people who are self-sabotaging and struggling with mental illnesses, but they help you see what we didn't learn. This is it. We didn't learn. I'm going to say this. We didn't learn what it meant to be a person and be in a healthy relationship with another person. That sounds pretty broad and sweeping, but it's true. We weren't taught how to relate. We weren't taught about emotional control, coercion, manipulation, boundaries, self, attachment, detachment. We weren't taught those things and modeled these things because our parents loved us, hopefully loved us, and thought that would be a good percentage of the equation and figured they wouldn't do what their parents did, or thought they just had some pretty good sound principles about becoming a good citizen and they tried to enforce those. Mental health is way more complex than that. So you have to get your training somewhere else. That's the fact. And the fact that you're here listening to me tonight or on the podcast later, something brought you to this point. I said to the staff at in-service this morning, I'm going to say this even for fear of how it can come across. Listen to the podcasts over and over again. Read the 2 books I wrote. At least that's what I have to offer. And I can say that with some humility because I didn't come up with this stuff. They are my stories and I used my own words to describe them, but somebody else taught this to me. Dr. Jamie Gill, J.D. Gill, taught this to me. And when I thank her for the difference she's made in my life and my family's life, she says to me what I'll say to you, which is, I'm just doing for you what somebody else did for me. You learn how to think by listening to the podcasts, by going to Al-Anon, by going to Coda. People usually go through a series with me. They either like what I'm saying right away, but often I hear them say, I had no idea what you were talking about. I'm sure some of you right now are saying, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. But for some reason, people keep listening sometimes. And then they say, now I get it. Now it makes sense. And then eventually they get to the point and they say, I wonder what Brad would say in this moment. That's what I do. When I'm in a session that's difficult, or a dynamic that's difficult, I say to myself, what would Jamie say right now? What would Jamie do? Because I trust Jamie's sensibility. I know she knows and has put in the work to figure out what it means to be a person and love another person. My mom and dad didn't know that. So I don't think what would they do? And I don't look to pop culture. I don't even look to self-help experts. I was telling with the staff this morning that I've been trying to follow some new self-help experts, and I'm finding over and over again, they're just telling people what to say. That's anybody with minimal training can do that. You notice I don't do that with you? When you say, what do I do when my child doesn't respect the consequences? A pat answer, a simple answer, that doesn't help anybody. I shouldn't say it doesn't help anybody. It can help somebody if you're on the precipice of just needing a tool. Like I get tools from therapy too, but why can't you set a boundary? Why isn't it automatic to you? Why don't you tell your mother not to give you advice that it's none of you're not interested in hearing from her? Why don't you tell your friend you're not comfortable in this conversation or situation? Why don't you tell somebody I'm not asking for advice? And I could go on and on and on. That's what's interesting. That's the difference between self-help and therapy. Therapy is interested in how you're built, not what to say. Therapy is interested in resistance. If it was based on education, I'd be healthier than 99% of the people in the world right now because I have an education that's in my field in the top 1%, right? But I'm not. I'm a mess just like everybody else. And accepting and embracing that mess, I get told makes me tolerable by the family, friends, and employees around me as we can stand him because he knows he's an idiot. I somehow have digressed. Next question. My child has just graduated from Evoke and decided he wants to go into treatment to find into the treatment field someday and work at Evoke. Very common. He's 14, so he has a ways to go before needing to think about a clear career path. But given the strong connection he has to Evoke and the desire to stay connected, what opportunities are there for program graduates after they graduate? You can work it out with a therapist, but we do have visitors. I've had many visitors come out with me to the field. So the therapist can do that at some point. The pursuits trips that we do could be a part of it, where you kind of learn and get educated while you're still doing fun things. So there's pursuits trips. NOLS. What does NOLS stand for, Travis? Or Malia? NOLS stands for North American Outdoor Leadership something. NOLS. So there are things you can do that use wilderness to promote mental health and well-being. Yeah. But he can also make a visit to the field as an alumni visitor. If you coordinate it with his Evoke therapist, that can be something that can happen for sure. Someone says, do I have the right to ask myself to go to therapy? I feel like it would help in me feeling safe to share my feelings and vulnerability with him and trusting he can meet me where I am, which has been difficult. As well, it would be beneficial to the relationship with kids, specifically our son, who is working hard on his recovery. Knowing he was doing his own work and learning how to communicate from a more regulated place. If any of you are on Instagram, I want to read this to you. Well, I'm going to read it to you, even if you're not on this Instagram. But I'm going to read you this. My wife actually found this guy recently. So Malia, maybe I'll send it to you. Maybe I don't know if you can post it, but at least I can read it. I don't know if there's a way to post it. This guy's his handle is Jeff Brown Soul Shaping. So at Jeff Brown Soul Shaping. I think he's an author, and my wife has been sending me some cool quotes by him. But this is what he wrote, and it relates to your question. He wrote, "We can't meet somebody. We can't meet somebody where they haven't met themselves. We may want to, but wanting doesn't make it so. Everyone's on their unique journey. You can't push them to catch up with you. It just doesn't work like that. If they try, something will get broken or lost along the way, and they will actually end up further away from you than before. Better to honor their steps, just like you want others to honor yours. If you can't meet at the same place, bow to them and walk on. Do not guilt or shame them for being where they are. Respect it. It's their path to walk." So, my answer is you can make an invitation. You can make a request. You can talk about how you think it might be helpful. But if you start going beyond those basic invitations, you're starting to do what Jeff Brown is talking about. It doesn't work that way. It's like going back again to these 12-step groups. Just think about the alcoholic child or spouse. It would be easy to say, you need to stop drinking. It'll improve your physical health. It'll improve your relationship with your family. It'll improve your relationship at work, with your children. That's obviously true. But the moment you enter into a relationship of trying to control the other, you're off center. So invitations, encouragements, requests, asks, all of those are okay. But the minute it crosses that line to control, you've gone too far. I wonder if I can put it up on my screen. I'm going to take a second, go out of character for a second, see if I can pull it up on the screen. I might not be able to. Nope, I'm not going to be able to. I'm breaking all of my rules. Let's see if I can do this. Nope, I won't be able to do it. The quotes that I just shared. Oh well. North American Outdoor Leadership School. My child was just admitted to Evoke this week. This is all brand new to us. Can you comment on the intensives, the in-person versus the online? By the way, just keep listening. It'll make sense after a while. Read the books so you can do them at your own pace. Intensives are a 2.5 to 4.5 day immersive process where you look at your own stuff, your own family of origin. You kind of understand how your childhood shaped you today. You understand the themes. What I say is you understand what your project is, what your work is. Okay? We use psychodrama, group therapy, psychoeducation, individual therapy, art therapy, meditation, and mindfulness. We use all of those things. And so we're trying to get you into understanding what your work is. How did your relationship with your father, your sibling, your mother, how did it impact you, shape you? And how is that impacting the fights you're having with your husband or your wife or your son or your daughter? How's it impacting, or where you're feeling stuck or helpless or depressed or anxious? So it's 4.5. The in-person ones are 4.5 days. We have special COVID protocols. I'm running the one in February and March, right, Travis? Am I running the one in March also? I think so. So there's 6 or 7 participants in the in-person one, and you just have 5 days. It goes over 5 days to work on yourself, to look at yourself. It feels so, by the way, you guys, it feels so good. If you're open to it, you'll be nervous. You'll find excuses not to. You'll think about dropping off the day or the week before. And at the end, you won't want to leave. And you'll never, for the most part, it'll be one of the safest things you ever experience in your life. You'll feel safe. Somebody said to me that they really understood what love meant, and they grew up in a very, very loving family. You'll think that your issues aren't as serious as everybody else's, and then you'll find that everybody's issues are the same theme, right? There's all kinds of stories, but you just do your own work. Understand what that means, what your own work is. You don't have to come knowing what it is, you just show up. Just show up. Online is 2.5 days. So we've taken the in-person one and we've kind of split it in half. So it's online. It's 2.5 days. It's 6 people max. We do we the first one focuses on just your family of origin, and the second one of it, which is the second half of the regular in-person finding you, focuses on the here and now more. Okay, and then finding you two in person is if you've done the finding you and you want to do a deeper dive. It's just maintenance. It's deeper work. Finding you two is I love doing finding you two because people have a sense of what their own work is and they just want more of it. So I've done 10 of them myself as a participant, obviously not at Evoke. My wife has done 2. My adult daughter has done 1. My adult son has done 1. Um, like I said, I paid for friends, extended family. We pay for our therapists and others, our partners, to go to them. We just believe in them. And we go to other ones. We don't go to our own, obviously. So these are full price paying. We just know that it's a great way to get an immersive, intensive dive into your work. If it's new, it's a springboard to your work. If you have some therapy experience, it's a therapy accelerator. So I think I teach this to people that parents, I teach this to people that refer children to us. I said, I can't think of a better investment of time and money for your child, for you to make, for your child, than this work. I believe in it from my heart. We are attachment based. Most programs are built on a recovery or a recovery model or a psychoeducation model. We are attachment informed therapy based. We use experiential activities, but we look at our primary attachments and how they shape us. Parenting from the Inside Out is a great book that talks about this. My first book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, was based mostly on wilderness therapy stories with parents and children. And The Audacity to Be You really came out of the intensive work. So Travis tells me I am running the February. I know I'm running the February one, but I'm also running the March intensive. So my son is new to the program. How do you make the students feel comfortable and not feel abandoned by loved ones? Is it a shock to them? How do they deal with how do you deal with them not feeling sent away? Got it. You talk and you listen. You know, that's the most important thing in all of this work is listening. Understanding and validating. You don't have to lecture or teach them. You can empathize. They'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. Parents ask me the question, what if the child doesn't forgive me? Or will the child forgive me? And my answer is the child will forgive you when they grow up. You know, you're all going to make mistakes with your children where you weren't even trying to do something hard and beneficial, right? You yell at your children, you're going to leave dents into your children. I talk about that all the time. Evoke is a genuine, heartfelt attempt, dramatic attempt to try to do something to help a child. But it's the child's job to grow up and forgive the parent. I've sent 2 of my children to the program, 2 of my 4. And if my children came to me and said it's the worst thing in the world, which they haven't, I would just say, I'm sorry. Maybe I was wrong. I took my best guess. Right? You let the child be upset and feel what they're feeling. And when children are allowed to feel their feelings and get seen, they move through it. They move through it and grow and evolve. It's when we try to control what they think and feel. That's the irony. The irony is you send your children to us and we teach them how to feel, and they start saying things that are really difficult to listen to. We're not we're not really controlling how they feel and think anymore. We're trying to just get them to feel and think what they feel and think. And they'll figure it out. And you'll learn in the meantime boundaries and a sense of self. You'll learn the difference between control and influence. Right? You'll learn about child development. You'll learn about how your own issues are wrapped up in all of this. And you'll be happier and you'll be free. And you'll have more serenity regardless of what the people around you are doing or not doing. Someone writes, my daughter was enrolled in Evoke almost 2 weeks ago. I'm excited to learn and grow with her, but I'm feeling extremely overwhelmed and drained with the assignments, etc. Any suggestions on how to cope on my end? I'm set in my ways and my mind is racing to try to figure out how I will speak to her from here on out. Okay, our assignments for parents are more like a buffet. Just start off picking and choosing what looks good to you. Right? So the parent portal, the assignments, if you're overwhelmed, it's okay to take a break and to take a breath. We don't want to overwhelm you, but we know if you think you have to do everything right, I mean, that's part of what you're talking about, is you're coming from a place that we come from, which is we have to get it right. I don't know why I think you're a mother and not a father, but I do. I'm happy to be wrong, but it's part of your training. Your report card in our society, a mother's report card is her children. And so you're walking that razor's edge of guilt where you have to get it right. You're going to learn here, you don't have to get it right. You can't get it right. It's not even the goal. You know, the epigraph in my book, borrowed from Jamie Gill, says, why were each of us taught the notion of being correct when that very notion ensured our failure in the world? Enlightenment and mental health is not about being good or right, and it's about being you. And that comes from a place of love, genuineness, authenticity, and courage. And it leads to freedom. Mental illness is fear. Good, bad, right, wrong, right? Anger, shame, guilt. So it's a learning about a new way of being. So take your time. Pick from the buffet what looks good to you. Take a break when you need to. You can't get it right. Give yourself some grace. Read the book. Go to some meetings. Listen to other people. You don't have to talk. And take it slowly at the pace that you need. You recommend attending at least 6 sessions. For example, Al-Anon. Will Celebrate Recovery help or substitute? I don't know Celebrate Recovery. Sorry. My answer is probably. I don't know what Celebrate Recovery is. I've never heard of that. The importance of religious beliefs in therapy? Question mark. Many people attest to the fact that having a belief in a higher power is critical to mental health and balance, right? Something greater than you. You know, religion in and of itself is fairly neutral in my mind, because if your guilt and your shame is all wrapped up in your religion, it can become toxic. If your religion causes guilt and shame and fear, rage and anger and resentment, it's not being practiced towards its end, right? Religion is supposed to bring peace, courage, love, trust, faith. So I'm not a priest or a rabbi or a cleric, right? I'm not a pastor. So my lens is mental health. I think that religion for many people can be very, very beneficial. And I think any good therapist will encourage an individual to embrace whatever religious practices feel right to them, give them a sense of meaning and belonging and richness to their life for sure. So, but in general, we're kind of neutral to it because for some people it's a beautiful thing, and for some people it's a stone hanging around their neck. So, all right, that's all for this evening. If we have any left over, we can save them. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are on Amazon, also Audible. I narrated the book, The Audacity to Be You, myself, per your requests. Upcoming intensives, we have one in March 17th. Online, we have some spots available in February 10th. We also have online support groups for wilderness parents. So the next one will be January 23rd at 6:30 p.m., followed by January 28th at 6:30 p.m. If you're an alumni of our intensive program, February 9th is the next alumni, followed by March 9th. I already mentioned the 12-step groups many times tonight. You can also follow us on social media. All of these broadcasts are available on your podcast app. Just go to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, any podcast app, and search Finding You an Evoke Therapy Podcast, or you can listen on soundcloud.com. On Twitter and Instagram, you can find Evoke Therapy using the handle @EvokeTherapy, or you can also find @Evoke Therapy Intensives using that handle on Instagram. On Facebook, you can find either Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives, and the Evoke Therapy blog has new content each week on our website. My next broadcast will be tomorrow night. So tomorrow night is the final chapter, a summary and a deep dive into the final chapter of the book, The Audacity to Be You, Keys to Enlightenment. I look at myths and mental health and popular culture, and also keys to enlightenment. I look forward to that. Loved writing that chapter. Thank you for joining me this evening. Thanks for the work, for the questions. Thank you for the work that you're doing. For on behalf of your family, thank you for making your life your project. Take care. Talk to you later next time. Bye-bye.